Aria Thorne had learned to occupy space without claiming it. At 26, she moved through Silverpine Pack's territory like morning mist, present, necessary, but easy to forget. She'd perfected the art over 9 years, every movement calculated to minimize her presence despite a body that defied invisibility. The kitchen before dawn was her sanctuary. Here, in the hours before the pack stirred, she could work without eyes tracking her, without the weight of judgment pressing against her shoulders. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, preparing food for the gathering later that day. Alpha Matthias's retirement celebration. The entire pack would attend. Aria wouldn't. She never did. Outside the kitchen window, autumn mist rolled through the pine forest that gave Silverpine its name. The territory stretched for miles, or what was left of it. 20 years of weak leadership had shrunk their borders by nearly half. Rogue attacks had become routine. The pack structures themselves showed the decay, cracked foundations, rotting support beams, defenses that barely held. She tried to fix what she could. Alone, always alone, reinforcing the eastern perimeter during her off hours. Strengthening the north wall when no one was watching. Someone had to do it. Someone no one would miss if the work went wrong. A flash of movement in the polished serving dish caught her eye, her own reflection staring back. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Strong in ways the pack had taught her to see as wrong. She looked away quickly, old wounds opening with familiar ease. I will not bind myself to something so unnaturally large. 9 years since Rowan Silverpine had spoken those words during her mate selection ceremony. 9 years since the assembled pack had laughed, some openly, others behind their hands, but all of them laughing. The memory lived in her body, in the way she unconsciously hunched her shoulders, the way she took up less space than she occupied. She'd been 17 then. Young enough to believe the rejection was about her, not about them. Old enough now to know better, but not enough to stop believing it. The sound of vehicles approaching pulled her from the memory. She glanced through the window again. 3 trucks rolling up the main path, kicking up dust that caught the early morning light. The convoy everyone had been whispering about for weeks. The new Alpha had arrived. Aria's hands stilled on the knife she'd been using to cut vegetables. Darian Ashwood from the Northern Territories. She'd heard the rumors, ruthless, efficient, no tolerance for weakness or waste. He'd taken over 3 failing packs in 5 years and rebuilt them all through sheer force of will. And now he'd inherited Silverpine's mess. Pack members were already emerging from their dens, drawn by curiosity and anxiety in equal measure. Through the window, Aria watched the lead truck come to a stop. The door opened. The man who stepped out moved like a predator, controlled, economical, dangerous. Dark hair pulled back from a face marked by a scar running from temple to jaw. He surveyed the territory with eyes that seemed to catalogue every weakness, every failure, every crack in the facade. Aria felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of alpha she needed to avoid. The kind who saw everything. She turned back to her work, forcing herself to focus. She'd survived 3 alphas by remaining invisible. She could survive a 4th. Keep her head down, do her work, stay out of sight. The gathering that evening would be her test. She'd work the kitchen, serve the food, disappear before anyone remembered she existed. It was a pattern she knew by heart, a dance she'd perfected. Stay small. Stay silent. Stay safe. By the time the sun fully rose, the kitchen was a controlled chaos of preparation. Other Omegas filtered in, taking on their assignments with the same resigned efficiency Aria recognized in herself. They didn't speak to her beyond what was necessary. 9 years had taught them she preferred it that way. She didn't correct the assumption. Mid-morning, Beta Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. Older, traditional, fiercely protective of pack hierarchy. His eyes swept the room, landed on Aria. Thorne. The Alpha wants a full assessment of the perimeter defenses. Her head snapped up. Me. You're the one who's been maintaining the eastern wall, aren't you? His expression suggested he didn't approve of her initiative, or her existence. Yes, but. Report to the Alpha's office in 1 hour. He turned to leave, then paused. And Thorne? Don't waste his time. He doesn't suffer fools. The implication was clear, you're already starting from a deficit. After he left, the kitchen fell silent. The other Omegas stared at Aria with a mixture of pity and relief. Pity for her, Relief it wasn't them. Aria's hands trembled as she untied her apron. An audience with the Alpha. Direct contact. Everything she'd spent 9 years avoiding. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to find someone else to send in her place. But pack hierarchy was absolute, and a direct order from the Beta couldn't be ignored without consequences. 1 hour. She had 1 hour to prepare herself to stand before an Alpha who saw everything, in a body she'd spent 9 years trying to hide. The walk to the Alpha's office felt like a march to execution. Aria kept her eyes down, her shoulders hunched, making herself as small as possible. Pack members she passed either ignored her completely or watched with curiosity. Word had spread that the oversized Omega had been summoned. The Alpha's office was in the Central Lodge, a building that had once been impressive but now showed the same decay as everything else in Silverpine. Aria climbed the steps, each one feeling heavier than the last. The door stood slightly ajar. She raised her hand to knock, hesitated. Through the gap, she could see him, Darian Ashwood, bent over a map spread across the desk, making notes with sharp, precise movements. He looked up before she could knock, those predator's eyes finding hers with unnerving accuracy. Aria Thorne. Not a question. He already knew who she was. She stepped inside, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. Alpha. You requested. I requested someone who knows the perimeter defenses. Marcus tells me that's you. I've done some maintenance work, Alpha. Nothing. Close the door. She did, feeling the trap closing around her. Darian gestured to the map. Show me. And despite every instinct screaming at her to stay invisible, Aria stepped forward into the light. The map spread before her showed Silverpine's territory in painful detail. Red marks indicated weak points, compromised sections, areas where the borders had been ceded to rogue bands or neighboring packs. There were far too many red marks. Aria's fingers hovered over the eastern section, where she'd spent countless hours reinforcing what previous leadership had allowed to crumble. Here, she said quietly, pointing to the boundary line. The eastern perimeter was completely exposed 3 years ago. The support structures had rotted through. I've been rebuilding them section by section. Darian leaned closer, studying where she indicated. He smelled like pine and winter air, clean and sharp. Show me the rest. For the next 20 minutes, Aria walked him through every section she'd worked on. The words came easier when she focused on the work rather than the man listening. She explained load-bearing calculations, drainage patterns that prevented foundation erosion, weak points she hadn't been able to address alone. When she finished, silence filled the office. You did all of this yourself. Darian's voice carried no inflection she could read. Yes, Alpha. She caught herself before apologizing for taking initiative. Someone needed to. And previous leadership didn't think to utilize this knowledge systematically. Aria's throat tightened. How did she explain that previous leadership hadn't seen her as capable of anything beyond kitchen work? That her initiatives had been tolerated rather than valued? I wasn't asked, Alpha. Darian straightened, his expression hardening in a way that had nothing to do with her. I see. He made a note on a separate paper. I want a full written assessment of every section by week's end. Detailed recommendations for repairs, estimated materials, timeline. I can do that. I know you can. That's why I'm asking. He glanced up, caught her surprised expression. Something to say, Thorne? No, Alpha. She stopped herself again. Speak freely. I'd rather hear honest observations than comfortable silence. Aria took a breath, testing the boundaries he'd just set. I'm surprised you're asking me. Usually pack strategy is handled by ranked wolves. Usually ranked wolves demonstrate they're capable of strategic thinking. So far, you're the only one who has. He tapped the map. You're dismissed. But Thorne. She paused at the door. Don't make yourself invisible on my watch. I need wolves who see problems and fix them, not wolves who wait for permission to be useful. Over the following days, Aria watched Darian systematically dismantle everything Silverpine thought it knew about leadership. He trained with the warriors rather than observing from a distance, exposing weaknesses in their techniques with brutal efficiency. He reassigned roles based on capability rather than bloodline, causing immediate friction among the elite families who'd held positions for generations. He worked alongside the Omegas, reinforcing the communal hall, his presence shocking wolves who'd never seen an alpha perform manual labor. And he kept finding reasons to seek out Aria. On the third day, she was inspecting damage to the north wall when his voice came from behind her. That section won't hold through winter. She didn't startle, she'd started expecting him. I know. But I don't have enough materials to rebuild it properly. I've been reinforcing what I can. Show me your solution. She walked him through her improvised approach, using salvaged materials to create a temporary support structure that would buy them time until proper repairs could be made. It wasn't elegant, but it was practical. Darian studied her work in silence, then nodded. Functional. But you're thinking too small. I'm working with what I have. No. You're working with what you've been given, which isn't the same thing. He pulled out a small notebook, sketched quickly. If you had proper materials, unlimited labor, how would you fix this? Aria blinked. No one had ever asked her that before. The design poured out of her, a complete reconstruction of the north wall that would address not just current damage but prevent future deterioration. Proper drainage, reinforced foundations, modular sections that could be repaired individually without compromising the whole structure. Darian listened without interruption, making occasional notes. When she finished, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Why aren't you head of pack security? The question was so unexpected that Aria actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. Because I'm an Omega who works in the kitchens, Alpha. That's not an answer to my question. It's the only answer that matters. He closed the notebook, his eyes never leaving hers. Not anymore. The storm hit on day 4. Aria was on the eastern perimeter when the first drops fell, heavy, cold, promising worse to come. She'd wanted to finish one last section before dark, but the weather had other plans. She was securing the final support beam when lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook the ground. The rain intensified within seconds, transforming from drops to sheets that turned the ground to mud. Aria grabbed her tools and ran for the nearest shelter, a supply shed 50 yards away. She was halfway there when she heard his voice. Thorne. She spun to find Darian emerging from the tree line, soaked through, carrying surveying equipment. He must have been inspecting the outer boundaries. This way. She changed direction, heading for the shed. They reached it together, slamming the door against wind that tried to rip it from its hinges. Inside, the small space smelled of old wood and rust. Rain hammered the roof like drumfire. Aria pressed her back against the wall, breathing hard, acutely aware of how small the shed was. Of how close Darian stood. He set down his equipment, pushed wet hair from his face. Hell of a storm. They come fast this time of year. She kept her eyes on the door, the wall, anywhere but him. The eastern perimeter will hold. If my reinforcements are worth anything, yes. They are. Simple statement, no elaboration. Silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of rain and thunder. Minutes passed. The storm showed no signs of letting up. You don't have to do that, Darian said quietly. Do what? Make yourself smaller. Physically, I mean. You've been pressing yourself into that corner since we got in here. Aria's jaw tightened. Force of habit. Break it. It's not that simple. Isn't it? He moved, not toward her, but to the opposite side of the shed, giving her more space. You take up the space you take up. That's not a flaw. Easy for you to say. Is it? He met her eyes directly. I've seen your work, Thorne. I've watched you move through this territory like you're apologizing for existing. You're doing everyone a disservice, but mostly yourself. You don't understand. Then help me understand. The words hung between them, genuine invitation in his tone. Aria opened her mouth, closed it again. How did she explain 9 years of conditioning? Of being told she was too much, too wrong, too everything? Before she could answer, the storm intensified. A crack of lightning struck close enough to rattle the shed's walls. Darian glanced at the roof, calculating. We might be here a while. Seems that way. Another silence, but different this time. Less hostile, more uncertain. Two wolves trapped together, beginning to see each other as something other than Alpha and Omega. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something shifted. Neither of them knew yet that this was the beginning, that storms had a way of washing away what shouldn't have been built, leaving space for what needed to grow. But they'd learn. The storm ended near midnight, leaving Silverpine's territory washed clean and gleaming under moonlight. Aria and Darian had spent 3 hours in that shed, talking in fragments between long silences, about territory weaknesses, about pack history, about everything except what hung unspoken between them. When they finally emerged, something had changed. Not resolved, but acknowledged. Aria told herself it meant nothing. She told herself that every day for the next 2 weeks as Darian continued his systematic dismantling of everything Silverpine had been. The announcement came during the morning assembly on day 12 of Darian's leadership. Effective immediately, all pack positions will be re-evaluated based on demonstrated capability rather than hereditary assignment. Darian's voice carried across the gathered wolves. Calm and implacable. If you can't justify your role with competence, you'll be reassigned to where you can actually contribute. The reaction was instantaneous. Elite family members erupted in protest, voices overlapping in indignation. This is unprecedented. Our families have held these positions for generations. You can't just. I can. Darian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. And I will. This pack has been dying slowly for 20 years because comfort was valued over capability. That ends now. Marcus stepped forward, his expression troubled. Alpha, perhaps a more gradual transition, would give time for resistance to organize and undermine the changes. No. Darian's eyes swept the assembly. Anyone who wants to challenge this decision can do so formally. Otherwise, evaluations begin tomorrow. Aria watched from her usual position at the back, her stomach tight with anxiety. She recognized the look on certain faces, the Silverpine elite who'd spent years ensuring wolves like her stayed in their assigned places. They wouldn't accept this quietly. And they'd blame her. She'd seen the way they watched Darian seek her out, the way whispers followed when he asked her opinion on territorial matters. She needed to make herself invisible again. Before the backlash found her. But Darian had other plans. Thorne. A moment. She'd been trying to slip away after the assembly. Of course he'd noticed. She approached reluctantly, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Alpha. I need your assessment of the western border. This afternoon. I can prepare a written report. I want you to show me in person. The written report can come after. He turned to Marcus. Reschedule my afternoon meetings. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, Alpha. Aria wanted to protest, to explain that this kind of attention was dangerous for her. But you didn't refuse a direct order from your Alpha. As you wish, she said quietly. The western border inspection took 4 hours. Darian asked questions, listened to her explanations, took notes. He treated her observations as valuable intelligence rather than the rambling of an omega above her station. It was intoxicating. And terrifying. You see patterns, he said as they walked back toward Pack Center. Not just structural patterns, strategic ones. How rogue bands move, where they'll probe for weaknesses. I pay attention. Most wolves pay attention to what's directly in front of them. You're seeing 3 moves ahead. He paused, studying her. Why isn't anyone utilizing this? Aria's hands clenched at her sides. They kept coming back to this question, the one she couldn't answer honestly without revealing how thoroughly the pack had dismissed her. I'm not what a pack strategist is supposed to look like, she finally said. What is a strategist supposed to look like? She gestured vaguely at herself, at the body that had marked her as wrong since she was 17. Not this. Darian's expression darkened. Who decided that? Everyone. Every day. For 9 years. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, years of accumulated pain bleeding through. She waited for him to dismiss it, to tell her she was being oversensitive, that she needed to work harder to fit in. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and fierce. Then everyone has been catastrophically wrong. Something cracked in Aria's chest, not breaking, but fracturing just enough to let light through. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me understand. Tonight. Strategy session. Just you and me. Bring your maps, your observations, everything you've been keeping to yourself. Darian, she caught herself. Alpha, I don't think. That's an order, Thorne. My office. After dinner. He walked away before she could argue, leaving her standing in the path with her heart pounding and old wounds reopening. This was a mistake. She could feel it. But she couldn't disobey. The evening assembly was tense with undercurrents. Elite families clustered together, shooting hostile glances toward Darian's table. Younger wolves watched the new alpha with cautious hope. Maybe change was actually possible. Aria ate quickly, planning to arrive at Darian's office early. Get it over with. Provide the information he needed and escape before. Well, playing strategist now? She looked up to find Rowan Silverpine standing over her table. 9 years had added bulk to his frame and cruelty to his features, but his eyes held the same contempt they'd held when he'd rejected her publicly. Rowan. She kept her voice neutral. Must be nice, having the new alpha's attention. Tell me, Aria, what exactly are you doing to earn such favor? His smile was poisonous. We all know you're not equipped to be a strategist. So it must be something else. Heat flooded Aria's face. Around them, conversation had quieted, wolves watching to see how this played out. I'm doing my job, she said quietly. Your job is in the kitchens. Not playing at being something you could never. Rowan. Darian's voice cut across the hall like a whip crack. Every head turned. He stood at the far end, his expression absolutely cold. Repeat what you just said. Loudly, so everyone can hear. Rowan's confidence faltered. I was simply. You were sexually degrading a pack member who has contributed more to Silverpine's survival in the past 2 weeks than you have in your entire existence. Darian moved through the hall, wolves parting before him. Apologize. Now. Or challenge me formally. The hall went silent. A formal challenge, alpha against lesser wolf, would be a bloodbath. Everyone knew it. Rowan's face flushed red, then pale. I apologize for any offense. Not to me. To her. Rowan's jaw worked, humiliation warring with self-preservation. Finally, he turned to Aria. My apologies, Thorne. Good. Darian's voice carried steel beneath the calm. Touch her again, speak to her like that again, and rank won't save you. Understood. Rowan nodded stiffly and retreated, his supporters following. Darian looked at Aria. My office. 15 minutes. Then he was gone, leaving her shaking with adrenaline and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. She arrived at his office exactly 15 minutes later, maps rolled under her arm. Her hands still trembled slightly. Darian looked up from the papers spread across his desk. His expression softened when he saw her. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. What he said was unacceptable. What was done to you 9 years ago was unacceptable. He gestured to the chow across from him. Sit. Please. She sat, unrolling her maps with unsteady fingers. You know about that, she said. Not a question. I make it my business to understand why capable wolves are being wasted. Your rejection wasn't about your worth, Aria. It was about his inadequacy. Hearing her name from him, not Thorne, but Aria, did something to her carefully constructed walls. He's not wrong about one thing, she said. I'm not what people expect. No. You're better. Darian leaned forward. Now show me what you see. All of it. The strategy session lasted until past midnight. Aria spread her maps across Darian's desk, hand-drawn territorial surveys marked with patrol patterns, rogue sighting frequencies, seasonal migration routes. Years of solitary observation translated into intelligence no one had bothered to collect systematically. Darian studied each map with focused intensity, asking sharp questions that forced her to articulate instincts she'd never put into words. Where would rogues strike if they wanted maximum disruption? Which alliances between neighboring packs were stable versus opportunistic? What resources did Silverpine control that others might covet? Here, Aria pointed to the northern ravine. This is our weakest point strategically. It provides cover for approaching forces and direct access to pack center if breached. But it's also defensible if we position warriors correctly. Previous leadership didn't fortify it. Previous leadership didn't think rogues were organized enough to exploit it. And you think differently. I know differently. Rogue bands have been coordinating for at least 2 years. Small probes, testing responses, learning our patterns. She pulled out another map showing incident locations over time. See? They are not random. They are reconnaissance. Darian studied the pattern, his expression darkening. You're saying we're being evaluated for a larger assault. I'm saying someone is gathering intelligence. Whether that leads to assault depends on what they learn. He looked at her with something beyond respect, with recognition. You should be leading our Security Council. Aria's laugh was brittle. The council would never accept that. Then I'll create a new position. Strategic advisor, reporting directly to me. Darian. That's not a suggestion. His voice softened. You have a gift for this. Hiding it in the kitchens is a waste we can't afford. The words should have thrilled her. Instead, they terrified her. Visibility meant vulnerability. The higher she rose, the harder she'd fall when he inevitably realized his mistake. But she couldn't say that. Not when he looked at her like she was exactly what he'd been searching for. I'll try, she whispered. You'll succeed. He gathered her maps carefully. Go get some sleep. Tomorrow I'm announcing the new Strategic Council. You on it? The announcement caused exactly the disruption Aria had feared. Darian assembled the pack at dawn, his voice carrying across the gathered wolves. Effective immediately, I'm restructuring our security approach. Our new Strategic Council will consist of Beta Marcus, Head Warrior Kenna, Scout Leader Dimitri, and Strategic Advisor Aria Thorne. The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. An Omega on the Strategic Council. This is absurd. She has no training, no rank. Darian let them rage for exactly 10 seconds before his Alpha command rolled across the assembly like thunder. Enough. Every wolf fell silent, compelled by the weight of his authority. Aria Thorne has demonstrated more strategic competence in 2 weeks than this pack has shown in 2 decades. She predicted the eastern perimeter breach last month that cost us 3 warriors. She identified the supply route vulnerability that previous leadership ignored. She sees patterns you're all too blind or too proud to notice. He let that sink in before continuing. Anyone who wants to challenge this decision can present their strategic credentials to me privately. Otherwise, first council meeting is in 1 hour. The crowd dispersed slowly, wolves breaking into agitated clusters. Aria remained frozen, feeling the weight of dozens of hostile stares. A group of younger warriors approached, wolves she'd fought beside during minor skirmishes. The lead warrior, a woman named Kenna, offered a respectful nod. About time someone recognized your work, Thorne. Thank you, Aria managed. But Kenna's acceptance was a minority position. Most of the pack looked at her with confusion, resentment, or outright contempt. And Rowan's faction looked at her with something worse, calculation. The Strategic Council meeting was tense but productive. Marcus remained professionally distant, his disapproval barely concealed. Kenna and Dimitri were more open-minded, especially when Aria's tactical suggestions proved sound. By the meeting's end, they'd restructured patrol patterns, identified 3 critical infrastructure repairs, and developed a rapid response protocol for border breaches. Aria felt competent for the first time in years. Useful beyond her physical strength. It lasted exactly 4 hours. She was crossing the pack commons in afternoon sunlight when Rowan intercepted her, his usual supporters flanking him like a pack within the pack. Strategic Advisor Thorne, he said, loud enough for nearby wolves to hear. How impressive. Tell me, did you have to get on your knees to convince the Alpha you're useful? It's the only position where your size might be an advantage. Laughter rippled through his group. Aria felt heat flood her face, old shame rising like bile. I earned my position through competence, she said quietly. Competence. Rowan's smile was cruel. Is that what we're calling it? Because I remember clearly what you're actually suited for. Heavy lifting, maybe. Kitchen work. Certainly nothing requiring intelligence or... Rowan. Darian's voice came from behind Aria, cold as winter. She hadn't heard him approach. Rowan's confidence flickered. Alpha. I was simply... You were sexually harassing my strategic advisor and implying she traded sexual favors for her position. Darian moved until he stood beside Aria. In front of witnesses. After I specifically warned you about your behavior. I didn't mean. Apologize. Genuinely this time. Or we settle this formally, right now. The commons had gone silent. Every wolf within hearing distance watched, waiting. A formal challenge. Alpha against lesser wolf. It would be brutal and short. Rowan's face cycled through rage, humiliation, fear. His supporters edged away, suddenly unwilling to be associated with his challenge. I apologize, he forced out. Sincerely. I spoke out of turn. You spoke out of insecurity and spite, Darian corrected. Aria has accomplished more in 3 weeks than you've managed in your entire life, and that terrifies you. Because it means the world that elevated you based on your last name is crumbling. Rowan's jaw worked, but he said nothing. You're dismissed, Darian said. And Rowan? Stay away from her. This is your final warning. Rowan and his supporters retreated. The gathered wolves slowly dispersed, though Aria felt their lingering stares like brands. She turned to Darian, shaking. You keep doing that. Keep doing what? Defending me. It makes things worse. It makes things visible. His expression was fierce. They were already thinking it. At least now they know there are consequences. For how long? Until you realize I'm not worth the trouble. Aria. He waited until she met his eyes. You're worth considerably more than you believe. And I'm not going to stop showing this pack that truth until they accept it. That evening, Border Scouts brought troubling news. Aria was reviewing supply reports when Marcus entered the council room, his expression grim. We have a situation. Darian looked up from the patrol schedules. Report. Northern Scouts detected unusual movement. Multiple rogue bands converging approximately 15 miles from our border. How many? At least 30. Possibly more. Aria's blood chilled. She pulled out her incident map, cross-referencing the location. That's the staging area. The one I identified 3 days ago. Darian studied her map, then Marcus. Your assessment. Marcus hesitated, glancing at Aria. It could be coincidental. Rogues often gather before winter for resource sharing. Or. Darian prompted. Or Advisor Thorne's prediction was accurate, and we're looking at a coordinated assault. Darian turned to Aria. What's your read? She studied the map, her mind racing through patterns and probabilities. They're close enough to strike but far enough to avoid detection by casual patrols. They are waiting for something, ideal conditions, additional forces, or intelligence about our readiness. Timeline. Days. Maybe a week. Not longer. Darian made his decision immediately. Full defensive positions within 48 hours. Double patrols on northern approaches. Kenna, I want warriors drilled on rapid response to ravine breach. Dimitri, your scouts watch that convergence point constantly. He looked at Aria. You're coordinating defensive positions. I want your strategic assessment on every possible approach vector by morning. Yes, Alpha. As the others filed out to execute orders, Darian caught Aria's arm gently. You were right, he said. About all of it. I hope I'm wrong about what comes next. So do I. But if you're not, I'm glad you're here. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and terrifying in equal measure. Outside, night fell over Silverpine. Somewhere in the darkness, enemies gathered. And inside, Aria prepared for the moment that would either validate everything Darian believed about her, or prove the pack right all along. The attack came on the moonless night, exactly as Aria had predicted. She was on the outer defensive ring, positioned with 5 other wolves overlooking the eastern perimeter. Her reinforcements stood solid beneath them, the structures she'd built over years of solitary work finally serving their intended purpose. The first wave hit at midnight. 40 rogues surged from the tree line, hitting the eastern defenses with coordinated ferocity. But Aria's fortifications held, forcing the attackers to bunch together, limiting their numerical advantage. From her elevated position, she watched the assault unfold. Something nagged at her tactical sense, something wrong about the pattern. They're not committing fully, she muttered. The wolf beside her, a young warrior named Seth, glanced over. What? Look at their formation. They're pressing hard enough to engage us, but not hard enough to break through. They're testing response times. Maybe they're just bad at attacking. No. They're good. Too good. Aria's eyes tracked the flow of battle, seeing what others couldn't. This is a feint. Her mind raced through tactical possibilities. If she were commanding the rogue force, what would she do? Pin the defender's attention on the obvious attack while the real threat developed elsewhere. The northern ravine. Her blood went cold. They're going to flank through the ravine. Three-pronged assault, eastern diversion, northern main force, and... She scanned the territory, calculating approach vectors. Western pincer to cut off retreat. Seth stared at her. You can't know that. I can. And if I'm right, we have maybe 3 minutes before the northern force hits and divides the pack in half. Protocol was clear. Maintain defensive position, trust command structure, don't break formation without orders. But protocol assumed command could see what she was seeing. Aria made her choice. Hold this position, she told Seth, already moving. Thorne. Where are you going? She didn't answer, sprinting toward pack center where Darian coordinated the defense. Behind her, she heard Seth calling for her to return, heard other wolves shouting confusion. Marcus emerged from a command tent as she approached, his face furious. Thorne. Get back to your position. I need to see the Alpha. Now. You abandoned your post during combat. The eastern assault is a diversion. She pushed past him, ignoring rank and protocol. Where's Darian? You don't get to. Marcus, where is he? Her voice carried an authority she'd never claimed before. Something in her tone made him hesitate. Then Darian's voice cut through the chaos. I'm here. Report. Aria spun to face him, words tumbling out. Alpha, they are flanking through the northern ravine. The eastern attack is designed to fix our attention while the main force hits our weakest point. If they collapse that position, they'll cut the pack in half. Darian's eyes locked on hers. No hesitation, no doubt. How long do we have? 3 minutes. Maybe 4. Marcus protested. She abandoned her position based on speculation. It's not speculation. Aria pulled out the small map she always carried. Look at the eastern assault pattern. They are maintaining pressure without committing reserves. That's textbook fixing tactic. The real attack is elsewhere. Darian studied the map for exactly 2 seconds. Then his decision came sharp and final. Marcus, take 12 wolves north immediately. Double time. Kenna, shift your reserve force to support northern position. Dimitri, western scouts go active. I want eyes on any movement from that direction. Marcus's face registered shock. Alpha, if she's wrong. She's not. Move. Now. As Marcus raced to comply, Darian turned to Aria. His hand briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture of trust that meant everything. You're with me. We're going to make them think we haven't noticed. They repositioned to the eastern command point, maintaining the appearance of focused attention on the obvious assault. But Darian had quietly shifted reserves, prepared for the trap Aria had identified. 2 minutes later, howls erupted from the northern ravine. The main rogue force, nearly 50 strong, poured through the narrow pass, expecting to find minimal resistance. Instead, they found Marcus and 12 warriors in prepared defensive positions, with reinforcements closing from both sides. The trap became a counter-trap. Now, Darian commanded. The eastern defenders surged forward, turning from defensive to offensive posture. The rogues, caught between unexpected northern resistance and the eastern push, fractured. With me. Darian plunged into the combat, and Aria followed. She'd fought before, small skirmishes, defensive stands. But never like this. Never with everything on the line, with her tactical decisions being proven right or wrong in blood. A rogue twice her weight lunged at her flank. She sidestepped, used his momentum to throw him into 2 others. No grace, no refined technique, just devastating practical efficiency. Another came from her left. She caught his strike, twisted, heard bone snap. Around her, silver pine warriors fought with renewed intensity. Her warning had saved them from being divided. Now they were winning. She fought her way toward where Darian engaged 3 rogues simultaneously, his movements precise and lethal. He was handling them, but barely, and she saw what he didn't. A massive rogue, scarred and battle-hardened, circling toward his exposed flank. Protocol said trust the Alpha to handle his own fights. Instinct said move. Aria sprinted, closing the distance in heartbeats. The rogue lunged just as she intercepted, their collision like an avalanche. 250 pounds of muscle and momentum met her charge. Physics and fury together. She hit him with everything she had, all the strength she'd been told was excessive, all the power she'd learned to hide. The impact drove him sideways, away from Darian, his intended strike going wide. They crashed to the ground together, rolling through mud and blood. The rogue recovered first, slashing at her face. She blocked with her forearm, felt claws tear flesh, and drove her other fist into his throat. He gagged, stumbled back. She pressed forward, relentless, until he broke and ran. When she turned, Darian stood over the bodies of his 3 opponents, staring at her. Not with surprise. With recognition. You're welcome, Alpha, she said, breathing hard. His expression shifted, something fierce and possessive and wondering all at once. Aria. But there was no time. The battle continued raging around them. They fought side by side for the next hour. His precision and her power complemented perfectly, each covering the other's weaknesses. Other warriors rallied around them, drawn to the sight of Alpha and Advisor fighting not from safety, but from the front line. When Marcus's forces finally collapsed the northern rogue position, driving survivors back into the ravine, the battle's momentum shifted decisively. The rogues broke. Those who could fled into the forest. Those who couldn't surrendered or died. By dawn, Silverpine held the field. Aria stood in the aftermath, covered in mud and blood and bruises. Around her, warriors treated wounded, secured prisoners, counted their own losses. Minimal casualties. Because of her warning. Because Darian had trusted her instincts. She looked down at her hands, scraped, bleeding, but steady. For the first time in 9 years, she didn't see them as too big or too strong. She saw them as exactly what they needed to be. Thorne. She turned to find Kenner approaching, respect clear in the head warrior's expression. That was the smartest piece of tactical thinking I've ever seen. You saved half the pack tonight. I just... Don't. Kenner's voice was firm. Don't diminish it. You saw what needed seeing and you acted. That's leadership. Other warriors approached, wolves who'd mocked her days before now offering nods of respect, grateful words, acknowledgement. The pack was seeing her differently. Finally seeing her at all. Through the crowd, she found Darian's eyes. He stood among the wounded, helping treat injuries, but his gaze found hers unerringly. The look he gave her held more than respect. It held possibility. And Aria, for the first time, let herself consider that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. By nightfall, Silverpine had transformed from battlefield to celebration. Bonfires blazed across the pack commons, their light casting dancing shadows on faces flushed with victory and relief. Warriors recounted battle moments with increasing embellishment. Families reunited, grateful for survival. The scent of cooking meat and pine smoke filled the air. Aria lingered at the edges, old instincts pulling her toward the shadows. But tonight, the shadows wouldn't take her. Thorne. A young scout, barely 20, approached with his arm in a sling. You saved my position. If you hadn't warned about the northern assault, we'd have been slaughtered. I just saw the pattern, she said quietly. You saw what no one else could. He nodded respectfully and rejoined his group. Another warrior approached. Then another. Wolves she'd barely spoken to suddenly sought her out, offering thanks, respect, acknowledgement. Not everyone. The elite families still kept their distance, their expressions ranging from confusion to resentment. But enough wolves accepted her now that the territory felt different. She felt different. Through the crowd, Darian's eyes found hers. He didn't call out, didn't gesture overtly. Just held her gaze and inclined his head slightly toward the central fire. Invitation, not command. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. She could refuse. Slip away into comfortable invisibility. Maintain the safe distance that had protected her for 9 years. Or she could walk forward into the firelight and risk everything. Her feet made the choice before her mind could. Every step felt weighted with significance. Conversations quieted as she moved through the crowd. By the time she reached the central fire, most of the pack was watching. Darian stood as she approached, offering his hand to help her sit beside him. The gesture was simple, almost casual. But everyone understood its meaning. The Alpha choosing where, and with whom, he sat during celebration sent a message. Aria took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and she sat in the place of honor beside him. Whispers rippled through the assembly like wind through grass. Did you see that? Sitting beside the Alpha. Unprecedented. Darian either didn't hear or didn't care. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. You were extraordinary tonight. I did what needed doing. The deflection came automatically, years of diminishing herself impossible to overcome in a moment. No. His voice was gentle but firm. You did what no one else could have done. You saw the pattern, broke protocol to warn me, and saved lives. That's not what needed doing. That's exceptional. Aria's throat tightened. Any competent strategist. Stop. The word carried enough command that she fell silent. You've spent 9 years making yourself smaller. I need you to hear me. You are exceptional. Your mind, your strength, your courage, all of it. The words should have thrilled her. Instead, they unearthed every buried fear. Why does it matter what I am? The question burst out before she could stop it. I'm useful in crisis. That doesn't change what I am when peace returns. And what are you? The old wound opened, bleeding familiar poison. Too much. Too big. Too strong. Wrongful. She stopped, the final words catching in her throat. Wrong for what? Silence stretched. Around them, conversations had died. Wolves leaned closer, sensing something building. The words tore free like shrapnel. Too big to be a Luna. The commons went absolutely still. Aria's heart stopped. She hadn't meant to say it, certainly not loud enough for others to hear. But the words had carried across the fire, and now dozens of wolves stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. She'd exposed herself completely. Named the thing everyone thought but no one said. Rowan's faction looked vindicated. Some younger wolves seemed confused. They hadn't realized this was even a consideration. Others watched with sudden understanding, pieces clicking into place. Before Aria could flee, Darian stood. And in standing, he made this public. Too big for whom? His voice carried across the assembly, Alpha command threading through every word. Darian, don't. She reached for his hand, desperate to stop this. He caught her hand, held it. Too big for them. He gestured to the watching pack. Or too big for you. Aria couldn't speak, throat closed with panic. This was her nightmare, public exposure, everyone watching, judgment written on dozens of faces. She made a desperate gesture toward the elite families, toward the beautiful wolves who fit traditional lunar aesthetics perfectly. Everything her body wasn't. I see. Darian's voice softened but lost none of its intensity. You think your body disqualifies you? It does, she whispered. Look at me. I am looking at you. He moved until he stood directly before her, blocking out everyone else. I see a wolf who rebuilt our defenses when no one else would. I see a strategist who saved lives tonight with her intelligence. I see someone strong enough to carry the weight this pack needs, and has needed for decades. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. His eyes blazed. You were taught you were too much. I'm telling you you're exactly right. Confusion flickered across her face. You are too much strength for wolves who fear power in women. Too much intelligence for those who prefer decorative mates. Too much courage for those who choose comfort over growth. You're too much for a pack that's been dying because it valued appearance over substance. His hands framed her face, gentle despite the fierce emotion in his voice. But you're not too much for me. You're exactly what I've been searching for. Then Darian dropped to one knee before her. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Alphas never knelt, except in one circumstance. The ultimate gesture of claim and choice. Aria Thorne. His voice rang clear. You are not too big to be a Luna. You are exactly the size a Luna should be. Fierce enough to defend us. Strong enough to rebuild us. Brave enough to be seen when everything in you screams to hide. Tears burned behind Aria's eyes. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening. I'm not asking you to shrink, Darian continued. I'm not asking you to change or diminish yourself to fit some outdated ideal. I'm asking you to stand beside me at full height and help me lead this pack the way it deserves to be led. The assembly erupted, some in shock, others in protest. Marcus stepped forward, his face tight with disapproval. Alpha, this is unprecedented. The council should. The council, Darian cut him off without looking away from Aria, will accept my choice or find new positions. This pack has been governed by tradition that serves no one. That ends tonight. But other voices rose too. Kenna dropped to one knee in support. Dimitri followed. Then Seth, the young warrior from the eastern perimeter. One by one, wolves who'd fought beside Aria, who'd seen her competence firsthand, knelt in acknowledgement. Not everyone. Not even half. But enough to show this wasn't unanimous rejection. Enough to show this was possible. Amid the chaos, Darian focused only on Aria. You don't have to do this, she whispered. They'll never accept. I don't care what they accept. I care what's right. His smile turned crooked, vulnerable. I'm not doing anything except choosing the wolf I was meant to find. The question is whether you'll choose me back. Aria looked at the pack, judgment in Rowan's face, acceptance in Kenna's, confusion in dozens of others. Her entire future balanced on this moment. Old conditioning screamed warnings. This will end in pain. He'll realize his mistake. You'll be destroyed worse than before. But a new voice, small but growing stronger, whispered, what if he's right? What if you're exactly what you're supposed to be? Why me? The last desperate question. Why, when you could have anyone? Because you see what needs doing and you do it, even when it's terrifying. Because your strength matches your compassion. Because you've survived 9 years of rejection and somehow remained kind. Because when I look at you, I don't see what's wrong, I see everything that's right. He paused, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. Because when I look at you, I see home. Something in Aria's chest, the thing that had cracked open weeks ago in a storage shed during a storm, finally broke free. Not breaking apart. Breaking open. Yes. The word came out barely audible. I need to hear it clearly. Darian's voice was gentle. Not for them. For us. Yes. Stronger now. The pack fell silent, waiting. Aria stood to her full height, all 6 feet of her, broad-shouldered and powerful and done apologizing for it. Her voice rang clear across the assembly. Yes, I choose you. I choose this. I choose to stand beside you as Luna, exactly as I am. Darian rose, took both her hands in his. Around them, some pack members erupted in cheers. Others left in disgust, Rowan's faction storming away with faces twisted in contempt. But more remained than left. More celebrated than rejected. Marcus approached slowly, his expression still troubled but resigned. Alpha. Luna. He used her title deliberately, acknowledging what he couldn't change. Aria's hand trembled in Darian's. The first time anyone had called her Luna since the ceremony 9 years ago that had ended in public humiliation. Thank you, Beta, Darian said formally. As Marcus retreated, Aria swayed slightly. The adrenaline that had carried her through battle and this confrontation was draining away, leaving her exhausted and terrified and exhilarated all at once. Darian steadied her, his arm around her waist. Breathe. What did I just? You claimed your place. And yourself. He pressed his forehead to hers, public intimacy that would fuel gossip for weeks. We'll face them together. All of them. What if I can't? You can. You already have. Around them, the celebration continued, louder now, wolves debating and processing what they'd witnessed. But in the center of the firelight, Aria and Darian stood together. She had chosen to be seen. And somehow, impossibly, the world hadn't ended. Morning came too soon. Aria woke in her small den to the reality of what she'd done. Luna designate. Chosen publicly before the entire pack. No taking it back, no pretending it had been a dream. She dressed slowly, Every movement weighted with the knowledge that today, everything would be different. She was right. The moment she stepped outside, she felt it, the shift in how wolves looked at her. Some nodded respect. Others pointedly turned away. A few watched with open hostility. The pack had fractured cleanly down ideological lines. Luna, a young female warrior, one who'd knelt in support last night, offered the title with genuine respect. Thank you, Aria managed, still unused to the word applied to her. But 3 steps later, an elder wolf deliberately turned his back as she passed. The insult was clear. This was her life now. Walking through territory as a living symbol of change some embraced and others despised. The opposition organized faster than she'd expected. By mid-morning, Rowan had assembled the elite families in formal challenge. Not to Darian's authority, they weren't that foolish. But to his choice. The summons came through Marcus, mandatory council meeting to address concerns regarding pack leadership structure. Aria sat in the council chamber beside Darian, acutely aware of every hostile stare. The room was packed, far more wolves than usually attended council sessions. Elder Cassian spoke for the opposition, his voice measured and reasonable. Alpha, we respect your leadership. Your tactical reforms have already shown merit. But Luna is not a position for warriors or strategists. It requires different qualities, refinement, diplomacy, the ability to represent our pack's finest attributes to outside wolves. The implicit message hung heavy. Aria doesn't look like our finest attributes. Darian's expression remained neutral. Define finest attributes. Beauty, grace, elegance of form, qualities that inspire respect and admiration from other packs. Interesting. Darian leaned back. Because I define them as intelligence, courage, competence, and loyalty. Aria possesses all of those in abundance. But does she possess the skills required? Another elder spoke up. Luna responsibilities extend beyond combat. Diplomacy with neighboring packs. Management of internal disputes. Knowledge of ceremonial protocols and pack histories. Has she been trained in any of these areas? The question hung like a trap. Aria knew the answer. No. She'd been deliberately excluded from such training her entire adult life. Before Darian could respond, she spoke. No, I haven't. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Rowan's faction looked triumphant. But, Aria continued, I'm willing to learn. And more importantly, I'm willing to prove I can execute these responsibilities effectively. Rowan leaned forward, scenting opportunity. Prove it how? Test me. She looked directly at the council. Give me the challenges you think I'll fail. If I can't handle Luna responsibilities, I'll step aside. If I can, you accept Alpha Darian's choice. The chamber erupted in debate. Darian touched her arm, a warning. This was dangerous territory. But Aria had made her choice. If she was going to be Luna, she'd earn it in a way no one could dismiss. Elder Cassian conferred with other opposition leaders, then nodded. Very well. 3 challenges over the next week. Diplomacy, pack management, and ceremonial knowledge. Success in all 3, and we accept your position. Failure in any, and you withdraw your claim. Agreed, Aria said before Darian could object. That was reckless, Darian said the moment they were alone in his office. That was necessary. Aria paced, adrenaline still surging. You can claim me as Luna, but if the pack doesn't accept it, we'll fight this battle forever. I need to prove I belong. You don't need to prove anything. Yes, I do. She stopped, met his eyes. Not to you. To them. And to myself. If I'm going to be Luna, I can't just be the wolf you chose despite my flaws. I need to be the wolf who can actually do the job. Darian studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we prepare. You have 7 days. I'll help you with everything I can. Thank you. But Aria. His voice turned serious. You need to understand, they've given you challenges they expect you to fail. They're not testing whether you're adequate. They're setting you up for public humiliation. I know. She straightened her shoulders. So I won't fail. The next 7 days were brutal. Darian pulled every resource available. He taught her pack histories dating back 5 generations. He drilled her on diplomatic protocols, on reading power dynamics in negotiations, on the subtle dance of alliance and threat. Kenna helped her understand ceremonial traditions, the lunar blessing ritual, seasonal celebrations, bonding ceremonies. Every movement had meaning. Every word carried weight. Dimitri shared intelligence on neighboring packs, which alphas were traditionalists, which were reformers, where Silverpine's relationships were strong or weak. But the learning curve was steep. Aria had a week to master skills elite wolves trained for from childhood. She studied until past midnight every night, reviewing notes by candlelight until the words blurred. During the day, she drilled protocols, practiced ceremonial movements, memoized the intricate web of pack relationships and histories. Darian found her late on the 5th night, slumped over scrolls of pack genealogy, exhausted. "You need to sleep. I need to memorize the Thompson family lineage. They'll test me on it." "Aria." He gently closed the scroll. "You're going to burn out. What if I fail?" The fear she'd been suppressing burst through. "What if they're right, and I'm not? Then we try again. And again. Until they accept what I already know, that you're exactly who this pack needs." He pulled her to her feet. "But you won't fail. Because you're brilliant, adaptable, and too stubborn to quit." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. "I'm terrified." "Good. That means you care. Now sleep. Tomorrow, you prove them all wrong." Challenge 1 came on the 8th day. Alpha Matthias from Ironwood Pack arrived to negotiate expanded trade routes and shared border patrols. He was old guard traditional, his expression when introduced to Aria barely concealing shock. The lunar designate was supposed to be decorative and diplomatic. Aria was neither. The negotiations took place in the formal council chamber, with both packs' leadership present. Matthias directed all his comments to Darian, systematically ignoring Aria as if she weren't there. For 30 minutes, she observed in silence, analyzing his patterns. He was testing Darian's loyalty to his choice. Would the Alpha correct this disrespect, or allow his lunar designate to be marginalized? Darian said nothing, trusting her to handle it. So Aria did. "Alpha Matthias." Her voice cut through his latest point about southern trade routes. "You're concerned about border security affecting trade reliability. Let me address that directly." Matthias turned to her with poorly concealed irritation. "I'm discussing this with Alpha Ashwood. And I'm his lunar designate and strategic advisor. Which means border security falls under my expertise." She pulled out a detailed map. "Your concern is valid, but based on outdated intelligence. We've restructured our patrol patterns and eliminated 3 rogue bands in the past month. Here's the data." She proceeded to outline their security improvements with specific metrics, tactical adjustments, and projected outcomes. Not diplomatic platitudes, hard intelligence delivered with confidence. Matthias was forced to engage. As they worked through details, his irritation gradually shifted to grudging respect. She knew her material. More importantly, she understood the strategic implications better than most ranked wolves he'd negotiated with. By the negotiation's end, they'd reached terms favorable to both packs. As Matthias prepared to leave, he paused before Aria. "Unconventional choice, Ashwood. But capable." It wasn't warm acceptance. But it was acknowledgement. Challenge 1, passed. Challenge 2 came 3 days later. Resolve a territorial dispute between 3 families that had been escalating toward violence for 2 years. Aria spent 2 days investigating, walking the disputed land, interviewing each family separately, reviewing historical boundaries. What she discovered changed everything. The dispute wasn't actually about territory. It was about respect. She called all 3 families together in the commons. The Thompson family claims the eastern hunting grounds by historical precedent. The Rivera family claims them by current usage. The Blackwood family claims them by need. They've had the poorest hunting luck in recent years. All 3 patriarchs started speaking at once, voices rising. Aria held up her hand. "You're all right. And all wrong." Silence fell. "This isn't about hunting grounds. It's about old wounds." Thompson and Rivera families have been feuding since Elder Rivera refused a mating proposal 20 years ago. Blackwood family feels disrespected because their contributions during the Rogue Wars were never formally acknowledged. Faces registered shock that she'd identified the true issues. Here's my solution. She unrolled a new map. Boundaries redrawn based on actual hunting patterns. Everyone gets territory they're already using. Shared responsibility for maintaining the region creates mutual investment. And formal apology ritual between families to address accumulated disrespect. We're not apologizing, Thompson Patriarch started. Yes, you are. Because this pack can't afford internal warfare while external threats remain. You'll apologize, accept the new boundaries, or forfeit hunting rights entirely. The authority in her voice surprised even her. After tense deliberation, all three families agreed to the trial period. 2 weeks later, the system was working. Tensions had dissipated. Challenge 2 passed. Challenge 3 was the most daunting. Perform the traditional lunar blessing ceremony before the full pack. Dozens of specific movements. Ancient invocations in the old tongue. Symbolic gestures, each carrying layers of meaning. One mistake, and the ceremony would fail, and so would she. The night before, Aria practiced the ritual for the 100th time, her movements still uncertain. You're forcing it, Kenna said gently. The ritual isn't about perfection. It's about intention. If I fail in front of the entire pack, then you'll have failed trying. Which is better than succeeding at staying invisible. The ceremony took place under the full moon. The entire pack assembled, even those who opposed her came to witness her potential failure. Aria stood in the ceremonial robes that had been specially made for her. No existing lunar robes fit her frame. She looked across the crowd and found Darian's eyes. He mouthed, "You've got this." She began. The movements came, muscle memory from endless practice. The invocations flowed in the old tongue, blessing the pack with protection, prosperity, unity. But as she progressed through the ritual, she added something no previous lunar had. Between traditional invocations, she spoke from her heart. I bless this pack with strength, not the strength that conquers, but the strength that endures. I bless this pack with unity, not the unity of sameness, but unity of shared purpose. I bless this pack with growth, the courage to become what we're meant to be, not what we've always been. The pack absorbed her words in silence. She completed the final invocation flawlessly, her voice carrying across the assembly. When she finished, even Elder Cassian nodded approval. Challenge 3 passed. The council vote came immediately, accept Alpha's choice of Luna. Result, 11 in favor. 4 opposed. She'd won, not unanimously, but legitimately. That night, alone with Darian, Aria finally let herself feel it. I did it. You did. But Aria, you know you didn't have to prove anything to me. I know. But I had to prove it to myself. That I could do this. All of it. And now. Now I'm terrified. Uncertain. Both at once. That's how you know you're ready. She leaned against him, exhausted and exhilarated. For the first time in 9 years, she felt like she belonged. Then Marcus entered urgently. Alpha. Luna. We have a problem. Border scouts reported Rowan and his core supporters had left pack territory hours before. Destination unknown. But scouts tracked them heading toward known rogue territories. The implication was clear. If Rowan couldn't remove Aria through politics, he'd try other means. Darian's expression hardened. Double border patrols. This isn't over. Aria straightened, fear giving way to resolve. No. But we face it together. 2 weeks passed intense preparation. Aria's official lunar ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon. Most of the pack had embraced the change. Young wolves especially saw her as proof that merit mattered more than bloodlines. But Rowan's absence hung over everything like a storm cloud. Border patrols reported increased rogue activity. Something was building. The morning of the ceremony, Aria and Darian walked the pack boundaries together, traditional pre-claiming ritual. Frost coated the pine trees, beautiful and cold. A moment of peace before the storm they both knew was coming. Do you ever regret choosing me? Aria asked quietly. The complications it's caused. Darian stopped walking. Never. Not for a second. You. I regret the years I spent believing I was wrong instead of wronged. You're here now. That's what matters. They were on the far northern boundary when the alert came through Marcus's voice. urgent over the radio. Alpha, we're under attack. 3 points simultaneously. Rowan's brought rogues, at least 60 wolves. Darian's eyes met Aria's. Run. They sprinted back toward pack center. 2 miles of rough terrain. They arrived to chaos, 3 simultaneous battles, pack defenders stretched desperately thin. And there, at the center of the main assault, stood Rowan. Stand down, Ashwood. Rowan's voice carried across the combat. This ends when you renounce your mistake and send her away. Around them, fighting paused, wolves wanting to hear Darian's response. The only mistake, Darian's voice rang clear, was this pack allowing your father to poison it with his narrow vision. That ends now. Then you choose destruction. Rowan signaled, and the battle resumed with vicious intensity. Aria and Darian fought side by side, their styles complementing perfectly. Around them, the pack rallied, inspired by Luna and Alpha fighting not from safety but from the front line. But Rowan's forces fought desperately. They'd committed everything to this assault. Then Aria saw it, Rowan circling toward Darian's exposed flank, 3 rogues with him. The same tactical situation as weeks before, but more dangerous. She had a choice, hold her strategically important position, or abandon it to protect Darian. No hesitation. She moved. She intercepted Rowan and his rogues in a collision of muscle and fury. 4 against 1, terrible odds. A rogue's claws tore her shoulder. Another slammed her into frozen ground. Pain exploded through her ribs. But she held the position long enough for Darian to turn and help. Together, back to back, they faced the remaining attackers. Both blooded. Both exhausted. Both unbroken. Rowan, seeing his plan failing, made one final desperate lunge, not at Darian. At Aria. If I can't remove you politically, I'll remove you permanently. But Aria was ready. She caught his momentum, used it against him, and threw him 10 feet into the mud. She stood over him, bleeding but victorious. I am not something to be removed. I am Luna of this pack. I earned it. I fought for it. And you will never take it from me. Rowan's remaining supporters saw their leader defeated. The rogues fled. The battle was over. Marcus secured the prisoners. Rowan would face trial and exile for treason. That evening, despite exhaustion and injuries, the lunar ceremony proceeded. The full moon rose over Silverpine as the pack gathered. Aria approached the Alpha Stone where Darian waited, the assembly forming a circle around them. This time, there were no protesters. Only witnesses. Aria Thorne, Darian's voice carried across the clearing. I claim you as Luna, as partner, as equal. I offer you my protection, my loyalty, my pack. Darian Ashwood, Aria's voice rang clear and strong. I accept your claim. I offer you my strength, my wisdom, my unwavering support. Where you lead, I stand beside. Where you fall, I lift you. She paused, then added words that came from her heart. And to this pack, I offer everything I am. Not despite my differences, but because of them. I am your Luna, exactly as I am, exactly as you need. When they marked each other, the traditional bonding, the pack felt it. Luna bond snapping into place like a key turning in a lock. This wasn't political appointment. This was right. Marcus approached, his expression no longer troubled but accepting. Alpha. Luna. The title came easier now. Around them, the pack howled, acceptance, celebration, unity. Aria's hand trembled in Darian's. He squeezed gently. We did it. We survived it. No. His eyes blazed with pride and love. We transformed it. 3 months later, spring came to Silverpine. Aria walked through territory that no longer felt hostile. Wolves greeted her, Luna, with genuine respect. The pack was rebuilding, growing stronger, expanding their borders for the first time in 20 years. She found Darian training young warriors, his movements still precise and deadly. He saw her and smiled. After 3 months, still looked at her like she was everything. She joined the session, teaching defensive strategies. A young female wolf, large like Aria, uncertain like Aria had been, watched with hunger in her eyes. After the session, Luna? How did you stop believing you were wrong? Aria knelt to meet her eyes. Someone saw me when I couldn't see myself. But more importantly, I chose to be seen. Being different isn't wrong, it's just different. The question isn't whether you fit their idea of right. It's whether you have the courage to be yourself anyway. Understanding dawned in the young wolf's face. She nodded and walked away, back a little straighter, head a little higher. Aria stood, watching her go, and felt Darian's arms wrap around her from behind. You're changing lives, he murmured against her ear. We're changing lives. Same thing. They stood together as the sun set over their territory, Luna who was told she was too big, Alpha who knew better. She was still too tall by old standards. Still too strong. Still too much. But by the standards that mattered, courage, competence, compassion, she was exactly right. I love you, Darian said simply. I love you too. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me. The moon rose over Silver Pine, casting silver light on a pack reborn. A pack that learned the hardest lessons, that strength comes in unexpected forms, that worth isn't measured by appearance, and that the fiercest hearts make the truest leaders. Aria Thorne had been too big to be a Luna. Until an Alpha held her, chose her, and proved that sometimes being too much is exactly enough. The end. Did Aria's journey inspire you? If you believe that strength comes in all forms, that being too much is actually being exactly right, share this story. Comment below, what part of yourself have you been taught to hide? Tag someone who needs to hear this message. You are exactly the size you're supposed to be. Read the full story and discover more tales of wolves who dared to be different at your platform. Because every pack needs a Luna brave enough to be seen.